I'm going to ask you a question, and I want answers. So feel free to answer. Let's keep it nice. Let's keep it clean. But I want answers. What are some of the things you have heard Christians fight over? Debts. Politics. Randy, you're wrong. Decorations. Music. Any others? Again, we're keeping this clean. Traditions. Yeah. We're keeping this clean, and it's starting to get a little dirty. So, talk about traditions. They're called doctrine. No, I'm just playing.
Seats in the church pew. Seats in the church pew.
Seats in the church pew. Yeah, try sitting in someone's pew, or yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I've actually had people come in and say, "Excuse me, you're in my seat." That causes conflict. Here's just some others. They're silly little arguments, but they're not silly little arguments that are happening in church. The type of communion cup. There was a time when churches split over the type of communion cup. This is my cup, not these are my cups. Everybody drank out of the same cup. I think the Spanish flu hit, everybody drank out of separate cups. But churches split over what kind of cup to use. Type of grapefruit to use. Somebody made the mistake of buying cran apple grape, and it just shook up the whole church one time. Not here, the type of bread. Personally, I want pumpkin spice for fall, but I know that might be a problem. So unleavened, keep it. Color of paint, color of the carpet, pulpit, no pulpit. There was an argument one time because someone brought Irish coffee creamer to church. Smelled too much like liquor. There was an argument over, church actually had a debate over this, whether people would be allowed to wear black t-shirts, because black, is darkness, too close to the devil. This congregation also never had deviled eggs. Argument over who should use the copy machine. You want to use the copy machine, go use it. Clock in the sanctuary. No, I don't want a clock in the sanctuary, especially right up here. I don't want people looking up the clock. I want people looking at me. But now everybody has cell phones. So should we allow cell phones to be in the sanctuary? No, because I don't want you looking at how long I've been preaching. Budget meeting. The budget wasn't balanced by 10 cents. There was a big argument over that until the preacher put 10 cents in the offering plate. Again, these are silly, but we can see the problems caused by these issues. The communion thing, there was a United Methodist Church of South Fork. The communion cup debate hit, and there became a new United Methodist Church of South Fork. 100 years later, no one knows why they split it. It's a big deal. Conflict is a big deal. Someone said the church is the only army that kills its soldiers. Internal conflict tends to hurt us. We've been talking about stress. And we've been using the 23rd Psalm as a guide to get over stress. A shepherd for stressful times. Conflict is a huge stressor. And little breaks my heart more than conflict within the church. Conflict between a brother and sister. Some of you know me, know how hard that is for me sometimes. I handle stress well. I deal with it well. But it hurts when there's conflict. Yeah, the thing is, God knows that. God knows that conflict hurts us. And He cares about what stresses us out. So we're going to go to the 23rd Psalm. And we're going to read that 23rd Psalm, just through verse 5. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for His name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for You are with me. Your rod and Your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. You prepare a table. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. This is one of the parts of this scripture I think is hardest to understand. I understand it in the context of David. After all, God did. He prepared tables many times in the presence of his enemies. David ran for years after getting anointed. He prepared a table in front of his enemies. We know that David was the anointed. He was the chosen king, meaning he had God's protection. And his cup definitely overflowed. David, despite all the things all the flaws he had, his cup really overflowed. He was a great king, great kingdom. That's the context of David. But what's the context for you and I? Prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies? No thanks. I really don't want to eat with my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. Get that sticky, slimy stuff off my head. I don't want that on my head. What's the context here? Cup overflows. Yes. I got that. I understand that. Give me that. Give me that overflowing cup. The table in my enemies, in front of my enemies, and oil on my head. What's the context? How do I understand this? And then, how does this all relate to my sermon topic on conflict and conflict within the church? Really, I don't know how I'm going to pull this off. To better understand this context, we need to understand the context of the whole psalm. This is a psalm about the relationship between the shepherd and the sheep. That's the context of this psalm. It's all about the shepherd and his sheep. David understood this relationship probably better than any of us ever could. He knew the job of the shepherd. He knew the behaviors of the sheep. He knew what they needed. He knew that every spring, the shepherd would move his sheep from the winter pastures down low to the summer pastures up high. These pastures were plateaus. They were mesas. We would call them mesas, or tablelands. They were high in the mountains, but they were flat pastures. Before the sheep were led to these tablelands, the pastures, the shepherd would go ahead and prepare the pasture for the sheep. Make sure that there was good grass to eat. Make sure that he killed all the weeds that might poison the sheep. Looking for signs of predators. Where were the wolves and where were the bears? So I know to keep my sheep out of those areas. He would clean the rivers, sometimes even damming up portions of the rivers. Sheep, they don't like water that moves. If a sheep goes along a stream that's flowing fast, they're not going to drink. Domesticated sheep. So dam it up, and you've got quiet, still waters for the sheep to eat drink peacefully. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. As shepherd, as the good shepherd, God prepares a table with good, safe pastures. Even though the enemies might be present, we're safe. That's what it means. He prepares a table in the presence of my enemies. We're safe. We have good pastures. We have what we need even in the presence of our enemies. These pastures, they seem like a pretty good place, don't they? Specially prepared for you. Good grass, the poisonous weeds gone. You know where the predators are. It seems really great. This is a great place. Problem is, during the summer, the plateaus are plagued with flies. If you've ever been to Alaska, you know what it is to deal with summer flies. They are horrible. I'm sorry, you can experience that here. Who's gone to May Day in Rocky Hawk? All right. You understand the plague of flies. Something that is supposed to be so pleasant, like a pasture of green grass, is ruined by the misery of buzzing flies all over you. In the Holy Lands, there's a particularly nasty fly that really brought a lot of stress to sheep. This fly liked to lay its eggs in the nose mucus of the sheep. Then the larvae would come, and the larvae would climb up the nose, and you can imagine how disgusting that is to a sheep. You can imagine. I know. Keep it together. Don't get some Epicat. Just keep it together. This drove the sheep mad. They would bang their heads against the rock. They would jump up and down and run into trees. They would roll around in the dirt. Anything to get relief from these tormenting insects in their nose. Sometimes it even drove them so mad they would kill themselves. Even seeing these flies drove sheep mad. They wouldn't eat. As long as the flies were around, they wouldn't eat, or the ewes wouldn't give milk. It just drove them crazy. So at the first sign of flies, at the very first sign of flies, shepherds would cover their heads in oil made of linseed, sulfur, and tar. This would keep the flies away and bring peace to the flock. You anoint my head with oil. His oil protects me from the things that torment me. The things in this world that stress me out. His oil protects me. Didn't know you were getting a biology lesson. The summer plateaus also bring about a very nasty parasite that causes really itchy infections. Problem is, very contagious. So if one sheep has the parasite, they touch the other sheep, and it just spreads through the whole herd like wildfire. The whole herd is just a miserable, itchy mess. They're driven mad by this. The first sign of the parasites, what does the shepherd do? Anoints the sheep with oil. Very first sign of the parasite. Anoints the sheep with oil, and it remedies the issue. The parasite is gone. He anoints my head with oil. He protects us from the things, the parasites in our society that can spread like wildfire, or wildflowers, wildfires. He protects us from those things. Another way the shepherd uses oil. Didn't know there were so many ways to use oil. Another way the shepherd uses oil is he uses it to protect the sheep against the things in the pasture that might hurt them. Remember, he prepared this pasture. What could hurt him? Well, he couldn't get rid of all the thorns. He couldn't get rid of all the rocks with sharp edges, or the briar bushes that could scratch us. So the shepherd, the good shepherd, puts oil on to protect against those thorns and those bushes and the rocks. And when sheep do get injured, the oil heals the wounds. So protection and healing. He anoints my head with oil. The good shepherd's oil protects me against the things in this world. And when the things in this world do get me, his oil heals me from the hurts of just living in a fallen world. There are just sometimes that things happen that are bad, no matter what I do. His oil protects me from those things. So as his sheep, your head being anointed with oil means protection and healing. That's what it means, protection and healing. Protection against the things that torment us, protection against the things in society that can spread and infect us. Protection against just living in a fallen world. And when you are injured, the oil heals you. What does this have to do with stressed relationships? Relationships that are hurting. Relationships that the conflict really does torment us. What does this anointing have to do with that? There's another use for the oil. The shepherd used the oil in a different way. Summertime, sheep are normally peaceful. They're normally pretty calm. Summertime is mating season. So it's not calm. The male sheep, they butt heads, they knock each other senseless, all because you looks good. Get it? You. Okay, all because you looks good, they beat each other senseless. Female sheep also butt each other. If you've ever had sheep, female sheep will butt each other. They little squabbles over this is my piece of grass, or this, whatever. They fight. The shepherd puts a very slippery oil on the heads of the rams and the ewes, and that way they'll still fight, they'll still have conflict, but they'll kind of ricochet and slip right off each other. And if they are injured, the oil will help heal the wounds. I don't know if this is true. We irritate each other.
That is true.
That is true.
Quite regularly.
Sometimes. I'm not going to go quite regularly. Unless you're in a relationship with me, then it's maybe all the time. We get irritated with each other. We butt heads. We wound each other. That's part of it. Our deepest hurts, our deepest stress, come from conflict with others. Think about it. Your deepest issues in life, the thing that causes you the most stress, isn't it because you're not in good relationships in some way, shape, or form? Relationships really stress us out. We need an oil from a good shepherd. We need some kind of oil from a good shepherd. So the impact of the conflict, because there will be conflict, but we need the oil so that the impact of the conflict is lessened. And when we do hurt each other, we have oil that heals. Relationships. This is very important to Jesus. In John chapter 16, or John chapter 17, when he's praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, one of the things that he says, one of the very last things he says, is he prays for the disciples, and he prays for those to come, future disciples. He prays that they are one, that they're unified, they have good relationships, and they look good to the world. He prays for that. He didn't pray for only his disciples. His prayer was for you and I. He wants us to be unified. Paul says, do whatever you can to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bonds of peace. Unity. Positive relationships matter. Matthew chapter 5, which Don just read, Jesus said something very profound. He said, if you're in worship, get up and leave. If you have a conflict with someone else, if you know someone else who has a conflict with you, it is more important that you get up and leave and reconcile that relationship than it is to be in worship. Now, everybody stay seated. Don't leave. Because I don't want everybody to leave at one time. Jesus knew the conflict, and he knew the remedy, the oil that we needed. I believe that that oil that God gives us to kind of protect us and heal us is summed up in one word. And it's more complex than this, but I'm trying to sum it up in one word. Forgiveness. Forgiveness is the oil that it protects you when there is conflict. It protects you from injury. Forgiveness when there is a wound. Forgiveness is the oil that heals that wound. Think about it. If you have a problem forgiving others, look at Jesus. Forgiveness is what healed that wound. There was a wound between God and us. Our conflict separated us from God. Forgiveness healed that. And the next time you have a hard time forgiving someone, just think of yourself. If God forgave me, he can forgive you. Forgiveness is the oil that heals the conflict. So how do we get there? How do we get to forgiveness? Because it's not the easiest thing to do. How do we get there? When you leave worship to mend a relationship, the first thing I want you to do is check your intent. Know what your intent is. Are you in it? Are you trying to mend relationships so you can win the argument? Shame them and show them what they have done wrong? Or is your intent to make things right? Reconciliation. Make things right. Help others grow. Do you want to shame and show them they were wrong, or you want them to grow? Reconcile or win. Matthew chapter 18 says, he gives an example of what to do when someone sins against you. Jesus says, if someone sins against you, go to them and explain what they've done wrong, how they've hurt you. If they don't listen, go get one or two people, more experienced Christians, to help you out. If that doesn't happen, present it to the church. Maybe the church can help that person understand how their sins have hurt not only them, but other people, the conflicts. Only then are you allowed to break off the relationship. If they don't respond to any of those, only then are you allowed to break off the relationship. And that is a last resort. But you get it. The point is, your intent is not to shame them and say, look at what you've done. Your intent is to make them aware of their sin and how it's affected you and how it affects God and how it affects the relationship. Your point is to say, we need to take care of the sin so we can reconcile our relationship. Not to shame them, not to win the argument. I'm holier than you. The second thing you need to do is seek to understand. You know, we all have different personality traits. I'm in contact with the attitude, I'm in contact with the short tempers, I'm in contact with the grumpy. And y'all might think you're in contact with him too. The actions of others cause conflict. Your attitudes cause conflict. We tend to gather ammo. We rehearse what we're going to say. How many Bible verses am I going to show them their attitude's wrong? We have everything planned out. But have you ever just stopped and tried to understand them? See where they're coming from? James says, be slow to anger, quick to listen. There's a reason. We need to understand. We need to seek to understand. I'm not given free rein to have attitude. If someone has an attitude, you need to work on it. It's just that simple. If someone has an attitude, you need to work at it. But the oil in the conflict, the way you can reach forgiveness is to start by understanding. Check your intent, seek to understand. Third, own your part. There are very few conflicts that are just one-sided. Most conflicts, both parties are in some way at fault. So own your part. If you need to start somewhere, start there. Say, this is my fault, and I am sorry. This is my part, and I am sorry. I've always had a very easy time saying I'm sorry. I was made to say I was sorry, which is not a bad thing. Kids being made to say they're sorry is not a bad thing. It teaches them. But saying sorry was never a problem. Here's the issue is, I would always go, I'm sorry, but I was right in this. Or, I'm sorry. Something you want to tell me? Fred, Mary, how do you think that went over with Melanie? Boy, it went over bad. And I have learned to a great extent. I've learned a lot more about apologizing being married. So again, you got to check your intent. Is saying sorry owning your part, or is it an attempt to just get one up on the person, or get them to say they're sorry? I'll say I'm sorry because you're going to say it to me. Own your part, whether or not the person owns their part. You are to forgive. Whether or not the person ever owns their part, whether or not the person ever has a good intent, whether or not the person understands a single word you're saying, forgive. Apologies and forgiveness are critical to a healthy flock. They're critical. Without it, we can't have a healthy flock. We need that oil. We have conflicts in church. That's not saying anything bad about the church. It's the truth. There's conflicts in every congregation. There's conflicts in every family. What conflicts? With your biological brothers and sisters or your spiritual brothers and sisters do you need to get up right now and walk away and take care of? Take these steps to reconcile. It's very important to reconcile relationships. Know your intent. Seek to understand. Own your part. Apologize. Forgive. Let's pray.